Hello there everybody, and apologies first of all for being absent, AWOL we'll say, from this YouTube channel for a while. Basically, I've had a busy couple of days. When the nursery's finished, I've been doing a lot of personal things just out with, so I haven't really had the best amount of time to be doing this. So I know that I have 3 days to catch up on here. Day 7, 8, oh no, sorry, it's day 8, 9 and 10 I believe. Yeah, 8, 9 and 10. I'll just double check, this is very poor planning. But yeah, apologies for that. That's not intentional by any way, shape or form, just sometimes these things happen. And yeah, okay. Very unprofessional, I know. Yeah, 8, 9 and 10. Okay, that's fine. So we'll just continue to do as we always do, talk away here about what happened. So on day 8, arrived, circle time, Reggie, hello song, why they're happy, etc. That's all I've written here. It's becoming very formulaic at this point. I have a copy of the daily plan in my folder as it stands just now, and that's very, very unlikely to change this startup. They did the weather again. Child E, whose name I can't mention for obvious reasons, identified that it was Wednesday because it's the day of the week started with a W. So obviously she was given a list of words. She picked up the letter W, Wednesday, and that was it. So that was good. That's early signs of reading. I mentioned this before with another child who did this. Child, what was her name again? Child L. There we go. She did that before. So it's interesting to see that because this is happening at circle time, the very youngest children, yeah, you know, the 26 plus month children, they'll be picking up on that. They'll be picking up on what's a wet, and then they're pointing it out. So it allows the other children in the circle to also, you know, get a bit of that learning that some of the older children are already quite adept with. I like that a lot. We moved on to free play. One of the practitioners was having a problem with printing her pictures off. Now this is a problem with the university's server. It only gives you a set amount of data that you can put on your computer at one time, on your partition of the hard drive. I don't know, I'm not huge, I don't understand the inner workings of the technology at the university, but I know that there's a set limit of data that you can put onto your side of the computer to your login, and they've exceeded that by quite a bit. So it wasn't allowing them to copy to their folders and then print it off, so I allowed them to, I think, put it on mine originally, but then I realised I can't have these pictures here, so I deleted them and moved them to their own folders. Basically I just set up a folder on the desktop. I'm kind of rambling here explaining the process, but I feel it's important to know because basically I fixed this problem for them, and I think they appreciated that quite a lot, so it helped me build a professional relationship with them. It strengthened the bond that we already had. I had a quick meeting and discussed ideas for colouring in sheets. Now this was a thing for me because I'm also looking at resources as well as language development. I wanted to know where the nursery stood on, you know, colouring in sheets, because a lot of children, they do like to do this, they do like to have the colour, and there's positives and negatives for both. After discussing with the deputy manager, she says that a lot of people are kind of against it sometimes in the nursery. Not the staff, but sometimes the parents are saying, why my child is colouring in, that's not what I'm paying for them to do. But it's kind of allowed, because the argument that the parents have is that it's not allowing their children to be creative, it's kind of prescriptive, it's like this is what you do. But they're looking at that from purely a cosmetic level. So they're colouring in, great, and that they might not see any use in that, the parents, but it's teaching the children to control the pens. I mean, if you're trying to keep inside the lines, you know, it's teaching the motor skill of control. It's knowing when to stop, how heavy to press down, how hard and how soft are certain bits, and how different colours blend and patterns. It's really good for that. And after discussing it, I think that I've decided that I'm going to actually provide a sheet myself, not to do during a group time, because I feel that group time should be for, you know, group learning, group activities, but for free play, and I want to see how popular they are. Now this is where I'm going to incorporate Frozen, because I talked about that the last time. This is where I'm going to incorporate that. I'm going to have a couple of things from the Frozen movie for the girls who I know for a fact will jump on that and they'll be really excited to do that. And I will also provide things from other films, other sort of Disney films, and just gauge how popular they are. I think what I will also do is I'll print off a couple of, bog standard things, like maybe, I don't know, flowers, or for the boys maybe a tank, something that, I'm gender stereotyping here, but something that I think will appeal to them on a purely aesthetic level, without any sort of copyright infringement. Just maybe like a tank, maybe a flower, something like that. Those are the examples I'm using. But also provide these sort of Disney sheets. Now what this will allow me to do is to see the relevance of appealing directly to their interests and not what you think they might like. I personally think that they might like, the boys in the class might want to colour in a tank and the girls in the class might want to colour in a flower. But I know for a fact that they all, like, after speaking to every one of them, they all have a favourite Disney film. So if I'm providing resources from Disney that are colouring sheets, I'll be able to see if this is true, if this is not baseless conjecture, if literally appealing to them on a purely personal level in order to enhance their learning is better than, just giving them the bog standard thing, then maybe go and play with something else. I'm kind of rambling a bit here. In my head, this makes sense. I hope it makes sense to you as well. Apologies if it doesn't, but again, that's what this comment section is for. If you have any questions regarding what I'm talking about here, feel free, pop it down below and I will answer them all as quickly as I can. Okie dokie. I noticed when I was kind of walking around observing, the children are becoming very creative in their play. I noticed this around the sand pit area. Now the way that they were doing it is, some of the kids were, just playing in the sand. That's on a surface level. That's what some of the kids were doing. They were just putting sand in cups and pouring it. But some of the children were doing things that I thought were really quite clever. One of the, I think she's one of the 2-year-olds. Child B, we'll refer to her as. We'll probably come back to her a few times. Child B had a watering can, just a small plastic watering can, not a heavy-duty one. And what she did was, I think it was originally meant for the water area, so they could fill it with water and pour. What she was doing was she was getting the cups and she was filling it up with sand. She was filling up this watering can with sand, and then she was dividing it out into all of the children's cups. Like when they all had cups, she was pouring it back in a sort of equal amount so that everyone would have the same. Now, a lot of that would kind of maybe go unnoticed by people who were just looking at a surface level, but that is fantastic play. That is early division for a start. That this will help her, I would assume, in the primary school to get the concept of dividing equally. And it's also promoting, sharing. She's sharing out this sand with everyone. And the fact that she was able to orchestrate this with only being 2 years old was astounding to me. Her language is so far advanced for her age. I do believe I'll be a bit more realistic here. She is on the upper end of the 2-year-old scale. She'll probably be turning 3 in the next few months, I believe. But to have that level of language where she is just now, her level surpasses some of those who are already 3 and some who are approaching 4 in the nursery. So that's really pretty special, I thought. Okie dokie. We have snack is popular. Yeah, this is the thing. During free play in both the morning and the afternoon, there's snack provided. Now, I think this is because some children maybe, I think every child will have breakfast and they all have lunch. Now that's a thing, that's definite. But throughout the day, some children are still, they're growing, they can be hungry, and sometimes they can't be. So snack is an optional thing, where the members of staff will prepare some little food. It doesn't have to be anything extravagant. Usually it's maybe just like buttered toast or grapes. But sometimes it's really interesting things, like it's been peppers before and things like that. It's promoting health and well-being, really. It's encouraging children to try things, because it's not their mum and dad going, oh, try it, you might like it. They have complete option to try this. Whether they want to or not is completely up to them. and that is really popular in the nursery. Snack is always, like, the table's always full. So I have to come to the conclusion that basically every child, if not every child, does go to snack at least once a day, whether it's in the morning or the afternoon, some twice. So that is good to know that they're obviously getting the nutrition that they're needing, even if they're not getting it at home, which I do believe that they all are. Sort of judging on how sort of happy and healthy these children appear to be, but at least you know you can gauge that in the nursery by doing this. Oh, I am on a rant today, am I? Right. The morning so far, this is kind of ironic given the length of the video, but I've commented here that there's very little to comment on today, and that's not uncommon because there has been, bugs spread around the nursery, which we will come back to again later. This is going to be quite worrying, but because there's kind of like bugs being spread around the nursery, there's quite a lot of children off, and there's not a lot really happening. There's not a lot really moving forward in terms of the entire nursery, so things have been slower during free play, and I think that's mostly because there's a lack of children there. So, Wednesday was a particularly quiet day. It picked up again on Thursday, and it was pretty busy again today, but Wednesday was pretty empty. We usually have roughly 40, upwards of 35 plus, between that sort of number, 35, 40. And I think on Wednesday we only had maybe 28, so we were missing a fair few children. But there you go. I had a quick meeting with the deputy manager. That was good. We sat and discussed that there's the LTID policy, which is learning together in Dundee, as a policy that this nursery follows. Now, how I managed to go a week and a half without hearing about this is beyond me. Maybe I'm just not asking the right questions. I should perhaps work on that. But I was able to engage with this document throughout the day. So I sat and I read it basically cover to cover, sort of not fully in depth reading it all, but kind of skimming, picking out the important parts. And this document is really useful. The nursery just now is to be used in conjunction with the Curriculum for Excellence, and that's what the nursery have been doing when they've been doing their weekly plans, which I will probably have a copy of in my folder. I will ask for a copy of that, even if it's just a picture. They will sit and plan every Wednesday, which will come up later on again today, and they will find points from LTID and also from the Curriculum for Excellence that they want to build upon. Now, it's child-led learning is the big important thing here in the nursery. When the children show an interest in something, they will pursue it, and they will pursue activities based on it. So this is kind of again talking what I'm talking about with the worksheets, the experiment I'm going to do with the Disney worksheets and the bog standard worksheets. It's to appeal to the interests of the children. Now, last week baking was a thing, so all of the group activities were kind of related in some way to baking. And the same with this week, it's been about growing and planting. So there's been a lot of flowers going around. There's a new wall display completely covered in child's work of flowers and insects. We've had outside play in the garden, a sort of scavenger hunt type deal. I think I mentioned that on Monday for the St. Patrick's Day episode, I suppose you could say. Things like that, just encouraging them to talk about growing and planting, and then that can lead on to why do I grow, and questions of nature, things like that, and that's really good. Questions of human biology as well, and that's kind of the direction that we've been taking with it so far. So very happy to see that the children were have an active part in planning with the ladies that work there. Right. The nursery itself is very, very efficient, I've noticed. They are very good at keeping everything planned, keeping everything in order, and also keeping a continuous record of things. Now, this is something that surprised me. Because of GIRFEC, children who are working with more than that have two or more agencies, I think, working in conjunction with them, say social work, family counselling. I'm not going to say name agencies, so I'm kind of a bit confused myself just now. But when children are in conjunction with a couple of those agencies, they have to have a child file by GIRFIC if you're adhering to the practice of GIRFIC. This file will have details of all the events and logs, stuff like that, that can be passed around the agencies so that they are not going over old ground. They're not asking all the same questions. They will have the answers, just so that no time is wasted and the child can get as much help as possible. Now the nursery kind of do this, but just for every child. Now it's not so much login events or a negative thing, not to say that GIRFIC does that as well, but it's more of it's a child file in the way that it keeps a track of their progress. And I thought this was really interesting. They have an individual file for each child, and in which they have records of all their work. They take pictures all the time. Now these pictures stay in the folder and they go to the relevant activity, and they go along with observations that the staff have made. I've got a copy of the observation sheet in my bag just now. This is really interesting, and next to it, they're having where the curricular areas are and what they're hitting, what targets they've been doing, and it's just really, really well organised and well orchestrated. After speaking to the manager and the deputy manager as well, she says that this is really well received by schools, and I can see why. I mean, I've heard horror stories in the past where children are coming up from nursery and there's very little in the way of evidence to support what they've been doing the whole time, so the teacher's kind of left in the dark. The teacher basically has a blank slate. But children who are coming from this nursery have an entire file dedicated solely to them that will go to them, that will go with them to the school. And the teacher can flip through that. Okay, they've already covered this, they've already covered this, I can maybe avoid this, I can maybe take bits of this, they will be really good at this, maybe they can help the young, maybe they can help their peers and things like that. Really, really handy and really well orchestrated, I must say. I have to give them praise for that. We went outside and then we had a staff meeting indoors afterwards. Nothing to comment on really with the outside play, being honest. During the meeting, what would be the word be? I wouldn't want to say managerial, but some inner workings things were discussed. Some changes were being made to the nursery. In accordance with government regulations, they have a 1% pay rise. That's fine. That's a new thing that's coming in, and they're also getting a new building. So this was the big talk. The nursery itself right now is too small. I think that would be not illegally too small, shall we say, but to the point where it's really difficult for any of the members of staff to really get anything done. There's enough room for the children to run around, to play, but the staff room is literally about the size of this room, and that's not exaggerating. There's the door back there. So I believe it would actually be a little bit smaller. There's a kitchen area where it would be on my right here, and that would just be a washing machine, a small oven that sits on top of the worktop, 2 sinks, a staff sink for hand washing, a fridge here, 3 seats, and then a tiny desk where the manager has to operate. It's really, compared to other nurseries that I've been in, there's a dedicated office solely for the manager. Then there's a staff room. This is a staff room, kitchen, washroom, manager's office, all rolled into one, and it's right next door to the children, where they're all screaming all the time, and you can hear the noise coming through. I applaud people who have worked here for like 11 years. It's a great working environment. The children are fantastic, the staff are excellent, but the level of noise that goes on, how they will have any time to update their files is insane to me. And hats off to the manageress as well. I mean, that's great that she's able to do that, but obviously now it's beginning to wear a little bit thin. It's been in the works for a while, but they've eventually managed to secure a building, and they're moving, but also keeping this one open. So what they intend to do is they have a big building that they've got just, I think literally round about the same area, maybe next door-ish to the Union, and they will be opening that up for the 1 to maybe 3-year-olds, maybe early 3s, and then they're keeping the main nursery that we're in just now open for the older children to play in. So I think that'll be really good. It separates a bit. They're also upping their numbers as well to compensate for having this huge building now. But to sort of separate it like that are really good. and the staff seem very positive about it. It means that it's going to be an increase to their hours, which was understandable, it has to be said, because the nursery just now, to obviously to pay for this, I think it's probably going to have to mean an increase in prices, and then parents are going to maybe start questioning, I'm paying this much and other nurseries are open so much longer than you are, why would I not send my child there, sort of thing. So they need to stay competitive, and that mostly, again, went down pretty well. I also did a bit of questioning myself. I found out that in terms of resource management, again, for snacks, like bread and milk and cheese, sandwich filler for snacks, and all that sort of thing, comes out of a petty cash that gets compiled every month. So they're given a budget at the beginning of every month in which they can use to buy resources, but also buy the snack and stuff. It's all kind of rolled into one, so that was interesting to find out. We had lunch. I have written in here, feeling pretty down. Okay. Story / outside time. That was fine. Now, during my lesson, shall we say, it wasn't really a lesson, it's an activity, you can't say it's a lesson, it's learning through play. I repeated the same one that I spoke about in the previous video, but with a younger group now. Now, this is a group of 2-year-olds. It's the second youngest group in the nursery, so I thought that would be interesting to work with them. I repeated the same task, build a castle. I just narrowed it down to castle and just left it at that because I didn't want to bring in the element of choice right there. I just wanted to, kind of streamline it because I had a bit shorter of a time with them. So we set it all up, everything was fine. It was at this point I realised that the end product was not going to be anything close to resembling a castle, and that was fine. The castle part of it for this group, for this trial, shall we say, was pretty inconsequential. That's not what I was carrying out the activity. That was kind of a facilitator so that I could hear the sort of discussions that they were having amongst themselves or with me personally. And from that standpoint, it was a good success. But from actually sticking to the plan and carrying out the activity and getting a finished product, it was a complete and utter failure. I can throw my hands up and admit that, but that wasn't the end goal for this group, so I feel like it was a success and a failure, sort of coupled. But I know how to improve for the future. A full detail of this also, again, in the folder, but I'll just give you a couple of quotes that I heard. Because they were younger, there was one girl who she doesn't have all the tools necessary to speak as of yet. She speaks a few words here and there, like she'll go mum, she'll go dad, she'll go bottle, she'll go toilet, she'll say things like that, but she's very quiet. Now, I don't think she's completely lacking in the ability to speak, but she's a little bit shy and a bit less sort of developed. But again, she's very, very young. She's sort of just middle twos, so it's not a huge issue, but it's something that will obviously be worked on moving forward. Some of the quotes that I got though, one of the children was building her castle, quote unquote, and said, "My doing that," pointing to it, "my doing that," and then that was her way of telling me, "Look at what I've done." Now, again, I was just doing the sort of sly correction that I've read about, and it was just saying, "Oh, did you do that? That's really good. Were you doing that? Just using all the correct grammar to her?" And she was going, "Yeah, aha," and that was good. So I was getting the chance to converse with her in something that was down to her level. So it was interesting to see that. She was one of the middle twos as well, so there was that side of it. But also, there was other children who were saying, "I want to build. I like to build." They were saying things like this. It was correct sentences, correct grammar structure, and that was really good as well. So even within the group, there was a dynamic shift, if you want to say. There were some children who could hardly speak at all, but some, like child B, who I mentioned earlier, who could speak for ages and just continue speaking, and that was great. That was brand new. I really enjoyed listening to her talk. But also, I didn't want to fall in the trap to not include the other children. So other quotes I heard were, one girl just picked up a horse and she was like, "It's a horsey." I was like, "So what does a horsey say?" And she's going, "Nay," just interacting again about what a horse says, and it was nice to see that she's picked up words here and there. One of the children said, "This is hard work." I thought that was quite funny as well. So just to reflect on it, the positives that we had, there was good language being used, especially from Child B. There was mostly all the children were engaging. It was this point the manager said to me, look, this group are very young. What you want them to do is great, and like we support that you want them to do that, but when we do it, we usually have to set up maybe 2 or 3 activities. I should have mentioned this to you before, but some of them just won't engage, and that's not your fault. Don't think about it like that. So I was like, oh, okay, well, that's fine, you know, so I will know that now for the future to set up maybe 2 or 3 things. Again, the negatives, it seemed like it was a little bit advanced for them. I noticed that right away whenever I seen them. I had this preconceived notion in my head of what 2-year-olds would be capable of, and then when I kind of seen it, I was like, oh, I'm kind of overshooting this a bit. Now, that's not me trying to be horrible or nasty, but I am very inexperienced at working with children at this age, so it was, you know, it was a stumbling point, but it was something that I can build upon. Overall, the lesson was good, and that was the end of that day, I believe. Day 9, whistle stop tour, because I've rambled on a bit too long. Arrive, registration, hello song, talking about feelings. I noticed that there was a child, we'll call him Child M, who was almost bullying one of his friends. Now, it was something that I'd noticed a few times. He kept on pushing him and saying, you can't play with me, things like that. It was a real shame. It was always the same child as well, so I brought it to the attention of the manager. I believe it's been dealt with in the background. He said, you can also deal with it yourself. So when I did see it happen and I took him aside, I said, do you think that's a good way to play with your friends? He was like, no. I was like, do you think your mummy and daddy would be happy if they heard you saying the things that you're saying to Child O? I almost said his name. Saying to Child O, do you think they would be happy or sad? And then he was like, it would be sad. And I was like, well, I don't want to see it happening again then. And for the most part, it's kind of subsided. And it's been a day since I've had this conversation, to be fair, so I can't really comment too much. We'll see how it progresses into next week. I noticed again that children have a direct impact on changing the dynamics of the nursery and the inner workings. Talking about circle time specifically, circle time was different in the past, and it changed because the children had an overall complaint with it, saying that it was too long and that they didn't all get a chance to talk. So the nursery staff listened to this, and then he said, okay, that's fair, we'll shorten it a little bit and then we'll let you talk to your friends so that everyone has a turn of talking. Now, this to me was really like, I was scratching my head. I was like, that's incredible. I would never have really thought of something like that. So it was nice to see it from this standpoint. Basically, because they're giving the children what they want, like they're coming down to the level of the children saying, okay, we understand that you want that to change. We've changed that for you. So it builds up a sort of mutual respect, because they can now go back and say, oh well, if you don't want to, if you're misbehaving sort of thing, maybe we'll just change circle time back because you're not being fair to us, but we're being fair to you. They can use that kind of thing, not like blackmail. I mean, that kind of sounds like it's blackmail, but it's to do with building that relationship where they're equal partners, but also there's a level of respect for the elders. So yeah, I was really impressed by that. Silly Sock Day was to be set for Friday. That's something I'll come back to obviously when I'm talking about today. During free play, I sat and read stories with some of the younger children. I thought it was grand. That was really good fun. Sitting reading them Jack and the Beanstalk, other things like that. But instead of just reading them the book, I was questioning them throughout, trying to promote language development as I'm set there to do. It was interesting to see what the children knew. When it was Jack and the Beanstalk, I was pointing, I was like, skimmed milk. So what do you think skimmed milk might be? Skimmed milk was the name of the cow. I thought that was pretty daft. And they were like, oh, it's what I have in my cereal sometimes, because it's milk. They recognise the word milk. Don't think they knew what skimmed was, but it got to the point where, I was pointing at animals in the book, and they were like, yeah, this is Elmer. And I was like, what's Elmer? Elmer's an elephant. And who's that? It's like, that's the Gruffalo. Is the Gruffalo angry or happy? He's like, he's angry. So knowing that they know these words and just reinforcing them and letting them build upon them and letting them, just practice them really. The books were really helpful as well. They were using bigger words, and I was kind of like, oh, do you know what, like saturated? That was one. I was like, saturated, do you know what that means? And they were like, oh, is it something to do with a statue? I think one of them said. It's crazy to see what kind of links they make. I was like, what if I was to say that it was really, really wet? Do you know what that would mean? They'd be like, yeah, it'd be like when it's out in the rain. And I was like, yeah, so saturated means really, really wet. And they were like, oh, okay. So they learned a new word. And of course I would question them when I finished the book as well. So I was like, so what does saturated mean? And they'd be like, it means it's really, really wet. Grand. I mean, like, it's expanding their vocabulary in a way that they're really enjoying. Another sort of activity that I did with them as well was just giving them the book. It's like, you tell me the story. That was great. I really enjoyed that, and the children seemed to be fairly fair away with it. Now, what that did for me is that obviously it was with the younger children who couldn't read like at all, so they were just looking at the pictures in the book and trying to make up the story as they go along, maybe based on what they used to, what they've heard before, or based on what they could see, and they were just describing everything to me. And that was a good way of getting them to say what was happening in their own words, so I could see what words they knew and what words they were using. If they were overusing a word, I could be like, do you not think there's maybe a better word than that? You know, if they kept on saying, I don't know, big, big, big all the time, it's like, so he's big, what would be another word? And they say, oh, large, or humongous, or gigantic, things like that. It kind of let them be the reader, which they loved, and it let me be like sort of the listener, which I loved as well. So it was a really fun activity for both of us, and I think there was some good learning to be had there. Okay, lunch, then story and quiet time. The nursery staff were playing Spot the Intro with the nursery children, but with nursery rhymes, so I thought that was good. Just getting them to listen, I guess. It's improving in their listening, talking and listening skills, I'd imagine. They had a Disney CD, which I've said was great. God, I'm talking a lot about Disney in this video, haven't I? Group time. I decided to go and observe a drama lesson because I thought, what better way to promote language than to actually act things out. What they did was the Three Little Pigs and the Three Billy Goats Gruff, I believe. So it was interesting because they have masks in which the children will be the characters, and then the nursery practitioner who's doing the lesson, or activity, sorry, who's doing the activity would say, and then, let's just say, and the ogre said, who's that clip-clopping on my wood? And then they say, ogre, you'd have to say that. And then he'd say, who's that clip-clopping on my bridge? It was getting them to repeat. So it was improving their listening skills, definitely, but it was also improving their language because they were they were having to, you know, repeat what they were saying, but also understand what they were saying as well, or otherwise the story wouldn't have made sense. And then at the end of that activity, they were allowed to just make the story themselves. They kept the characters, they kept the mask, and then they had their own series of events. This would usually result in whoever was the sort of baddie or the antagonist in the story kind of being the victor, because they were always like the sort of cheekier children that would choose to be them, which was fun. It was good to watch. There was no harm in it. And just hearing some of the things he said, you're clip-clopping on my bridge and I'm going to push you off, and just things like that, you know, they were just letting their imaginations run wild. I noticed also that a lot of stories from sort of older times, like Little Red Riding Hood and Jack and the Beanstalk, things like that, they've been altered to be more sensitive to like a sort of 21st century audience, and I thought that was kind of sad. I could see in a lot of cases where things were coming from. Now, there was a book that I saw today that said, my mum told me not to go and play with the gypsies in the woods. Now, today, you know, that doesn't fly. That's not okay. It's not the correct terminology. Times have changed and moved on. That's insensitive, and that needs to change. Other things that were happening as well. There were books that were talking about getting smacked and getting hit by a cane. This was quite a very 60s traditional sort of story time book. So that's actually been removed from the nursery now that we came across it. It's probably just sat there for a very long time and no one's really read it or picked up on it. So that's now been removed. But there's other stories like Little Red Riding Hood that's just, they've completely changed it to be more sensitive, and I got kind of upset when I read it. Not completely unconsolably emotional, but I kind of felt like it was a bit of a shame. I mean, the end of the story, I think it ended that the huntsman came to the door and then the wolf ran away before he had a chance to eat Granny and things like that, and I was like, that's not how the story works. You know, that the Gran gets eaten and then the huntsman cuts him in half and then he comes out. Now, to say that that's not acceptable for a nursery audience, perhaps. I mean, I'm not for or against it. I think that at the end of the day, responsibility lies with the parents for what they do and don't want their children to know. And if there's a big complaint against that, then fair enough, I can understand why it's been changed. But it seems like, you know, for generations these stories have been told, and then for them to just be changed, like on a whim like that, just because, you know, the world is becoming a little bit more sensitive. I don't know, it didn't really resonate well with me. Just because it wasn't what I was used to. And I mean, I am completely adaptable and susceptible to change, that's fine. But I just thought it was a bit of a shame, really. I know I've said that a few times now, but the kind of stories are lost now on today's audience. I'm starting to sound like an old man. Okay. I noticed that in terms of resource organisation and management, once again, some of the resources are ordered by the staff in accordance with their budget, but some of the sort of more custodial, there's a big word, some of the more like custodial, like janitorial materials are supplied by the university themselves. So like napkins, cups, paper towels, toilet rolls, all things like that, they're all supplied by the nursery, out with the budget, I believe. So that was good to know as well. I found out something new about that. Now, 36 and a half minutes in, we can get to today. I'll try not to dwell on it too much. Arrive, circle time, register, hello song. The theme of today is it's Silly Sock Day. So this is what the children were all about. I have my completely, let's see if this will work, my completely big orange socks on. And for the majority of the day I was walking around with them over the top of my jeans because that's as good as I can do. It's as good as a 21-year-old man's going to have to silly socks. So that was fine. The children were all excited. They were really hitting the roof this afternoon. They were really excited by this day. They knew that it was different. They knew that it was a change in dynamic, and they were really, really excited about it. The groups were merging for activities today. Now that's something that I really liked. It kind of shifted up the norm for the children, so that's obviously added to their excitement, but also it allows for people to work out with their sort of peer groups and out with their set groups for learning. So I thought that was really interesting as well. I supervised and observed in the IT/quiet room again. I've been in there quite a lot. I really enjoy being in there. I'm usually asked to go there. It's not like I ask to go there, I get asked to go there. And the reason for this is I can sit with my pen and pad and I can interact with the children, I can speak to them, I can play alongside them, I can watch them play, and I can supervise at the same time. But also whenever something happens, something that I think is interesting, you know, like a lot of the things that I'm talking about before with like Child L and Child M and things like that, talking and interacting with each other, I can take note of it right away. It doesn't get lost in translation. It comes straight from here to here without any time in between. So I think that's the most beneficial room in the nursery for me as a student. It was interesting to see that children using the fake till. Now the baking stand that was from last week is still up because the children still love it. Basically there's an oven, there's lots of materials like fruit, it's all plastic of course, and then there's a till as well, and that's the one that we're setting up the business with that I discussed in the previous video. The children playing with that was really interesting to watch because they didn't really know how it worked. The till is a calculator itself, so they didn't know how to use that. They didn't really recognise any of the numbers, but what they did know was to go beep 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 and then press the button and open the till. Now, I'm not just going beep 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 because I'm clinically insane. No, the children were actually making these noises because the till itself doesn't make any noises. But I thought that was interesting. That was proof to me that the children are constantly learning from their environment. Now, the only way that they would have known to go beep 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 and then open the till was to know that they've seen it happen in the shop. You know, they've heard real tills making the noise. They've seen the staff members in there pressing the buttons and then open the till, then closing it, then giving back the change. Whether or not they knew that money was changing hands is neither here nor there. I knew that the older children were, but you know, the younger set, between the 2 and the 3, they I don't think knew about money changing hands as of yet, but they did know to make these noises before the till opened. So they knew that things had to be typed in, and the older children knew that they had to put the prices in, then open the till, and then close it. So just learning by observation. I thought that was really interesting to see. The computer suite, when I say suite it's a single computer, remains ever popular. I've been here for 2 weeks now and I've not once seen it empty during free play. To a lot of to a lot of parents that might set alarm bells ringing, because there seems to be a big stigma about IT sort of damaging children's welfare, you know, TV and the computers, and that's all people do nowadays. They just sit around on their computers all day. I know, ironic, I understand, because I'm sitting doing it myself. But what the children are doing on these computers is tremendous. They have a set time, so they're not, you know, sitting there all the time, but sometimes they're sitting watching educational TV. Now that's not something that I usually, or that the nursery usually allows to happen, but when they're sitting watching it, sometimes it's okay to sit and do that because it's free play. It's their choice of what they do. But other times they're playing games that are encouraging them to, you know, learn numbers, learn count and things like that. But sometimes they're making things like this. Now, I feel inclined to show this to you. This was on CBeebies website, where there are games and stuff. Now, talking about growing and planting, this was just a random paint and text editor thing, and one child has put lots of flowers on here, and they've got like 2 ladybirds up the top, and they're bringing that to me and saying, look what I've made, because we're looking at spring and because we're looking at growing and planting, there's 2 insects and there's lots of flowers. You know, that's tremendous. I mean, they can go away and they can draw these things and go away and they can write these things, but they can put a visual representation up there on the computer and then have it in their hands like that, and then they can share it with all their friends. I thought that was great. This was one of the better uses of IT that I've ever really seen in a schooling environment. So again, really good work happening there. But the other thing that I want to mention is they know the importance of moderation. There's not one child who will sit there on that computer all day. They will go away and do other things. In fact, today, I have a quote right here. One child jumped off of the computer, ran up towards her friend and said, let's go and do some writing. So, I mean, there you go. They have this willingness to learn about everything. They're not just there to have a carry on. They are willing to take the learning into their own hands, and whether they're aware of it or not, they're giving themselves a huge variety of things to do. Okie dokie. The baking corner is still up and running, but we're starting to see this dwindling in popularity. However, after saying that, 2 children came along and played with it because I was sitting there, I think was the determining factor there. I noticed that Child K was building a foam skeleton. Now that was good to see. There's a resource that they have, and it's just all the body bits of a skeleton, and then it just all clicks together and it's foam. Just good work, I guess. The Child M and Child E were playing in the baking and shop area, and that was where the bulk of my observation happened today. I enjoyed that a lot. The 2 of them were, they had their personas. Both of them were working in the back in a kitchen, and then they're like, no, we have to put this in the cake and this in the cake, and then someone got it was a burger, plastic burger thing, and they threw it in, and it's like, no, that will make the cake taste horrible. Just things like that. So they're aware of what's going in, and they're aware of what sort of flavours and stuff mix well together. That was interesting. But also just, they were putting on almost an accent. They like to put on American accents, because obviously they're imitating for what they've seen on TV, which is tremendous to listen to. You can get a good giggle out of it, but is promoting them to be aware of other cultures as well, you know. That not everyone speaks that way, and not everyone speaks in their little bubble of how they imagine it. That's a good example to set to the younger children as well. Okay, I learned today that there are musical instruments in the nursery. That was something I wasn't aware of before, and I 100% plan to take full advantage of those in an activity, perhaps next week if not after the Easter break. Mostly because music is something that I'm really quite into myself, and after having a discussion with the nursery the deputy manager, she told me that they only bring them out every so often, but every time they do, the children are completely blown away by them, and they love them like so much. The reason they don't keep them out so often is because I think they get fought over. So she says if you're going to use them, probably use them in a small group so that you don't have people fighting and saying, I'm not getting an instrument, no, I'm not getting, and then, you know, you can imagine how well that would go. In terms of building relationships, I won over a quiet child today. She's 2, and she doesn't really have, to this point, I hadn't actually questioned anyone, but based on my general observation, I didn't think she had very much in the way of language skills. Now that was a very foolish observation for me to make. I put my hands up there and say that was terrible. That was not the way that I should have handled that. So the child came up to me, and she just kind of stood around, and she seemed really nervous. She was playing with the till. So in order to try and get her talking to me, because I'd asked her a couple of questions, and she just said, she just didn't answer me. She's kind of looked away, and I was like, you know what, why don't we play with this till? So I opened the till. I was just making stupid noises with the till originally. I was just going ba-ding whenever I was opening it, and then that kind of made her smile. And I started getting the toy fruits, and then I was putting them in, and I was like, do you think that that'll fit in there? And then she was like, why not? And then she started talking. She says, it's too big. And then we started a dialogue there, and by the time that we had finished with this game, she was laughing away, and she was completely comfortable in my surroundings. And it was at that point I realised she has no problem with communicating at all. She is actually one of the better children at her age for communicating. Oh, someone's at the door. Oh, that's annoying. Yeah, so she was really quite into that, and she was actually really very competent with English, and I like that. I like that a lot. Now, I also had an incident at lunch today where one child wasn't feeling very well. It was child S, and she is native Italian speaker. So she does struggle with English, and conversations with her can be very difficult. Now, she was feeling unwell, and the practitioner was going over her and saying, are you feeling unwell, are you feeling sick? And then she just she was just blanking her. Not to be rude or not to be cheeky, but because I don't think she understood what she was meaning. Now, to combat this, the nursery have a list of words for the children who are not first English speakers on the wall, like a sort of translation sheet, almost Google Translate, so that whenever there's an important question to ask, they can ask it, and then the child can obviously nod yes or no. So she consulted the sheet, and then it was something like nar or Bauer or Boar or Boer, I can't remember. I feel terrible for butchering a completely foreign language, but something in Italian that meant unwell or generally feeling sick. And when she said that to her, the head was going, the head was nodding. She did feel unwell, so I thought that was incredible. You have the staff who are, a million and one other things on their mind, are also consulting this sheet and speaking in their mother tongue, and that's crazy. I thought that was great. It was there's a sort of diverse culture within the nursery. There are people from all over. There's a young girl from Chile. There's a girl from Latvia. It's really interesting to see. I've never seen such a diverse nursery, or even school for that matter, in my entire life. So this is a completely different working environment for me. In terms of anything else that happened, we had a joint group play in the afternoon. During the day, where basically sock-related activities. There's not really a lot to say here. They were decorating socks. They were colouring in socks. They were playing sock puppets. Just basic things to promote Silly Sock Day. Lunchtime happened. Story and quiet time happened, and then free play happened. We didn't get outside again today. The weather was pretty bad. Only small groups went out at a time, just for a little while each. After lunch, we had the second group play, and it was pass the socks. So they passed the parcel, but it was like pass the sock, and that was fine. That was good fun for everyone. We were passing the socks all around in 2 circles, and yeah, that was it really. Whoever won was like, hooray, you've won the sock, and we were just taking pictures just to show them all getting involved. After that, they had a little bit of a dance, and then after that we had smell the sock. Now this was interesting. Hats off to whoever came up with this one. Basically, they put pegs over the end of the socks and put things inside them. So there was soap powder, there was cheese, which was absolutely disgusting, coffee, things like that, just so that they would pass this round this massive circle, and then they would smell the sock, and then they would all guess what it was. Promoting the senses, obviously, sensual development, fantastic. And the children loved it. They ate it up. They were so enjoying just having this sock, and they were all laughing and giggling away to themselves. They were having a really fun time with it, and I really enjoyed it as well. It was good to take a sort of back seat today, as it were, and just sort of see everything that was going on, as opposed to actually actively doing things myself. I've agreed with the staff to take the same 2 groups next week at the same times. I will incorporate better activities. On the Monday, I'm planning to take in those sheets I was talking about to sort of gauge the level of engagement with the bog standard sheets, as opposed to the ones that I've specifically sourced to meet their interest. Probably write up a little note on that as well, which we'll find in the folder. So thank you for joining me for this extended episode. What are we, 51 minutes in? I have a friend of mine who commented on Facebook when I posted these up, has said that's almost like watching a box set of a TV show, so hopefully you enjoy it as much as that, although it can be a little bit dry. Speaking of dry, my throat is also, so I'm going to end it right there, and I will see you guys again on Monday. Thank you once again for joining. You can subscribe to get constant updates, and you can post a comment down below if you want to challenge or speak to me on anything I've said today. Bye bye.